My brother Arthur raised his wineglass and looked at me from across the table. Eleanor, you've taken some money out of the investment fund I opened for you 3 years ago. I froze, completely frozen. What fund? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. My daughter Megan's glass almost tipped over. I saw her fingers tremble around the crystal. My son-in-law Mark turned white, completely white, as if he had just seen a ghost. He dropped his fork onto his plate with a sharp clatter that echoed in the silence. Arthur frowned. He leaned forward, confused. What do you mean, what fund, Eleanor? The investment fund I opened in your name. 3 years ago, $500,000. You're the only beneficiary. I felt the floor open up beneath my feet. $500,000. 3 years. I knew nothing about it. Absolutely nothing. I looked at Megan. Her face was rigid. Her eyes avoided mine. Mark had stopped breathing. I noticed because his chest was no longer moving. He was motionless, like a statue. Arthur, I said slowly, feeling each word leave my mouth as if it weighed a ton. I never received any documents. I never knew about that money. My brother turned pale. That's impossible. I sent all the papers to this address, in your name, signed, notarized. I even called to confirm they had arrived. A silence so deep fell that I could hear the wall clock in the living room. Each tick sounded like a hammer blow. Arthur looked at Megan. Did you receive any certified mail for your mother? Anything from First American Trust? Megan opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I don't remember. What do you mean you don't remember? Arthur's voice rose. I'm talking about a certified envelope, with official seals, impossible to forget. Mark shot up from his chair. I'm going to the bathroom, he muttered, but his voice sounded broken, desperate. Arthur kept his eyes on him as he left. Then he looked at me. Eleanor, are you serious? You never saw those documents? I shook my head. I felt a lump in my throat the size of a rock. Never, Arthur, I swear. My brother pulled out his phone. His fingers flew across the screen. He called the bank. He put it on speaker. A friendly voice answered. First American Trust. Good evening. This is Arthur Reynolds. I need information on investment account number 4471883922206. There was a moment of waiting, keys clicking. Then the voice returned. Yes, Mr. Reynolds. The account is active. Current balance, $120,000. The world stopped. How much? Arthur asked, incredulous. $120,000, sir. That's impossible. I deposited $500,000 3 years ago. With the returns, it should be over $600,000. The woman at the bank paused. Sir, there have been constant withdrawals. The most recent was 2 weeks ago, $30,000. Arthur gripped the phone so tightly, I thought he would break it. Who authorized those withdrawals? The beneficiary, Eleanor Reynolds. According to our records, she personally signed every request. I felt dizzy. The room began to spin. That's a lie, I whispered. I never signed anything. Arthur hung up. He looked at me with a mixture of horror and understanding. Eleanor, where do you keep your important papers? In my room. In the nightstand drawer. Does Megan have access to that drawer? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Megan owned this house. I was just a guest. A burden. A piece of old furniture taking up space. My brother stood up. He went up the stairs like a hurricane. I followed him, my legs trembling. Megan stayed in the dining room, motionless, her face the color of wax. Arthur opened my nightstand drawer. He took out my old wallet, my medical bills, my old photos, and at the bottom, folded neatly, he found a white envelope. He opened it. Inside were copies of documents, bank statements, withdrawal requests, and on every single one, my signature. But it wasn't my signature. It was an imitation. A good one, a very good one, but it wasn't mine. Arthur showed me the pages. You signed this. I took the papers with trembling hands. I looked at every line, every number, every date. $380,000. Stolen. In small, spaced-out withdrawals, carefully planned. For 3 years. No, I said in a broken voice. It wasn't me. My brother closed his eyes. He took a deep breath. Then I know who it was. We went downstairs in silence. Megan was still sitting. Mark had returned, but he was standing by the window, looking out at the street as if he wanted to run. Arthur put the documents on the table. Someone forged Eleanor's signature. Someone intercepted the bank mail. Someone has been stealing that money for 3 years. Megan didn't look up. I don't know what you're talking about. You don't? Look at these dates. Look at these amounts. 30,000 here, 40,000 there. Always right after you called me saying you needed money for home repairs. For the car. For the kids' private school tuition. Mark turned around. Arthur, this is a misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding. It's theft. It's fraud. And I'm going to get to the bottom of this. Megan finally looked at me, and in her eyes I saw no remorse. I saw fear. Fear of being discovered. Fear of losing what she had built with my money. But I also saw something else. Contempt. As if I had no right to that money. As if it was natural for her to take it. I stood up slowly. Very slowly. I felt like I was moving underwater. Megan, I said, with a calm I didn't know I possessed. Where is my money? She pressed her lips together. I don't know what you're talking about, Mom. My money. The $500,000 your uncle put in my name. Where is it? I don't have your money. But her voice trembled, and Mark looked at the floor. Arthur slammed his hand on the table. I'm hiring a lawyer. I'm hiring a private investigator, and I'm going to get back every last cent. Even if I have to sue you, Megan. Even if I have to send you to jail. Megan jumped to her feet. You're going to threaten me in my own house? This house, Arthur said, his voice ice cold, was probably bought with your mother's money. The silence that followed was devastating. I looked at my daughter, at my son-in-law, at my brother, and for the first time in 3 years, something inside me changed. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just thought, with absolute clarity, they don't know I already have a plan. They don't know I've been watching, that I've been waiting, that this moment was exactly what I needed. I took my coat from the rack. I'm going to bed, I said calmly. Good night. I walked up the stairs. I closed my bedroom door. I sat on the bed, and I smiled, because they thought I was a helpless old woman. But they were about to find out who Eleanor Reynolds really was. That night, I couldn't sleep. I just sat in bed, my back against the cold wall, staring at the ceiling. Arthur's words kept bouncing around in my head like an uncontrolled ball. $500,000, 3 years, forgery. I tried to remember when it had all started. When was the exact moment my life became this? Being a stranger in my own daughter's house. It was after Michael, my husband, died. It had been 4 years since his funeral. 4 years since cancer took him in 6 brutal months that left us breathless and broke. The treatments consumed everything. The house we owned, small but ours, had to be sold to pay the hospital debts. When Michael closed his eyes for the last time, I was 72 years old, with nothing but a suitcase of clothes and a few memories. Megan showed up at the funeral with Mark. She hugged me. She cried with me. She told me not to worry, that they would take care of me. Come live with us, Mom. We have room. You can't be alone. I didn't want to. I didn't want to be a burden. But I didn't have any options. I had no house. I had no money. My Social Security check barely covered my medications. So, I accepted. The first few months were good. Megan treated me with kindness. She gave me the guest room, small but comfortable. We ate together. We talked. But little by little, things changed. First, it was small comments. Mom, could you clean the kitchen after you eat? I just work all day. Mom, can you take the kids to school? I'm running late. Mom, I need you to watch the twins tonight. Mark and I have an important dinner. I said yes. I always said yes, because I thought it was my way of paying for the roof over my head. Then the comments became harsher. Mom, you're using too much hot water. Mom, is it necessary to leave the light on all night? Mom, you could eat less. Groceries are expensive. And finally, the comments turned cruel. Mom, I don't know how much longer we can keep you here. This house is small. The kids are growing. They need their space. Megan said that 6 months ago. We were in the kitchen. I was washing dishes. She came in with a folder of bills and dropped it hard on the table. Look at this. The water, the electric, the food. Everything has gone up since you arrived. I felt something break inside me, but I said nothing. I just kept washing dishes with trembling hands. Megan sighed. I'm not saying it to hurt you, Mom. I'm just saying we have to be realistic. Mark and I work hard. And you don't produce anything anymore. You don't produce anything. Those words stuck in my chest like glass. From that day on, I started to make myself invisible. I ate less. I spoke less. I locked myself in my room most of the time. I tried not to bother anyone. I tried not to exist. Mark was worse than Megan. He never insulted me directly, but his contempt was obvious in every gesture. In how he'd look away when I entered a room. In how he'd sigh when I asked a question. In how he'd talk about me as if I wasn't there. Your mom left the stove on again, he'd tell Megan loudly, even though I was sitting right in the living room. Your mom forgot to take out the trash. Your mom is using my shampoo. I started to believe it was true. That I was a burden. That I was a problem. That my existence was an inconvenience for everyone. I got up before dawn so I wouldn't run into them in the bathroom. I made myself cold tea so I wouldn't use the stove. I skipped meals so the food would last longer. I stopped calling my friends. I stopped going out. I stopped doing the things I loved. I became a ghost in my own life. And then came Christmas. Arthur called 2 weeks before to say he was coming from Miami. We hadn't seen each other in 5 years. He had built an import-export business that gave him more money than we ever dreamed of when we were kids in that dusty town where we grew up. Megan was thrilled with the news. She cleaned the house from top to bottom, bought expensive food, decorated the tree with new lights. Your uncle is an important man, Mom. We can't look bad. I said nothing. I just nodded. The day Arthur arrived, Megan asked me to stay in my room. We're just going to welcome him with a special dinner. And you, well, you know. We don't want you to get tired. I understood perfectly. They didn't want their millionaire uncle to see the old woman getting in the way in the living room. But Arthur came upstairs as soon as he arrived. He opened my door without knocking and hugged me so tightly he almost took my breath away. Eleanor, sister, I've missed you so much. I cried on his shoulder. I couldn't help it. That night, during dinner, Arthur talked about his life in Miami, his business, his travels, and then he looked at me with that warm smile he always had. Eleanor, 3 years ago I did something I should have done ever since Michael died. I opened an investment fund in your name. $500,000. So you would never have to depend on anyone again. So you could live with dignity. And then he asked the question that changed everything. You've taken some money out of the fund, right? Now, lying in my bed, with the door locked, the pieces started to fit together in my mind like a gruesome puzzle. I remembered all the times Megan got the mail before I did. It's just junk mail, Mom. Trash. I remembered all the times she asked me to sign papers without explaining what they were. It's just a permission slip for the kids' school. Sign here. I remembered how, 2 years ago, Megan and Mark bought a new car, a shiny black BMW. We got an incredible loan at the bank, Mark said proudly. I remembered the vacation they took to Europe last year. 2 weeks in Paris and Rome. We saved for years for this trip, Megan said. I remembered how they remodeled the kitchen, how they replaced all the furniture in the living room, how the twins started going to an expensive private school. And I, their mother, ate leftovers and wore second-hand clothes. They stole my money, my own money, the money my brother put there so I could live with dignity, so I could have my own home, so I would never again have to feel like a nuisance. And they took it, while I made myself small, while I apologized for existing, while I believed I was a burden. They used my money to live like kings. I felt something boiling inside me. It wasn't just rage, it was something deeper, colder, more dangerous. It was absolute clarity. I got out of bed. I walked to the window. I looked out at the dark street. And I made a decision. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to do something much worse. I was going to plan. Arthur had said he would hire a lawyer, an investigator, but I knew that would take time, months, maybe years, and by then, Megan and Mark would have hidden everything. They would have erased the evidence. They would have found a way to blame me. No, I had to do this myself. With my own hands, with my own strategy, I started to remember things I had learned in my life. Small details, conversations, names. Rita, my neighbor from the old neighborhood, the only friend who still called me now and then. She worked at a law firm before she retired. She knew lawyers. She knew investigators. Howard Mason, the accountant who handled Michael's finances when we had the small fabric business. An honest man, meticulous. If anyone could trace the money, it was him. And Arthur, my brother, with his contacts, with his money, with his rage. I had allies. I just needed time and patience. I sat on the bed again. I took an old notebook from the drawer, a pen, and I started to write. Date, December 26th. First suspicious withdrawal, according to the documents. January 15th. 3 years ago. $40,000. Purchase of the BMW February. 2 years ago. Trip to Europe. July of last year. Kitchen remodel. October of last year. Every piece of data. Every date. Every expense that didn't add up to the income Megan and Mark claimed to have. I wrote for hours, until the sun started to rise through the window, and then I heard footsteps in the hallway. I hid the notebook under the mattress. I lay down. I closed my eyes. The door opened slowly. It was Megan. I felt her approach. Stand by my bed. Mom, she whispered, are you awake? I didn't move. I breathed slowly, as if I were fast asleep. She sighed. I felt her hand touch my forehead, a gesture that was once one of affection. Now it was just verification. Verification that I was still the helpless old woman they could control. Forgive me, Mom, she murmured. But I can't lose everything I've built. I can't. She left. Closed the door carefully. I opened my eyes, and I smiled in the darkness. Because my daughter had just confessed, and I had heard everything. 2 days passed before I dared to move. 2 days in which I pretended to be sick, weak, confused. I stayed in bed most of the time. I barely ate. When Megan came in to ask how I was, I would just moan and close my eyes. I think the shock from Christmas affected her. I heard her tell Mark in the hallway, "She's in a bad way. Maybe we should take her to the doctor." "No," Mark replied quickly. "No doctors. No drawing attention. Arthur is already asking too many questions." Perfect. Exactly what I needed to hear. On the 3rd day, when the house was empty, I got up. I dressed in dark clothes. I took the extra keys Megan kept in the kitchen, and I left. It had been months since I had walked alone on the street. I felt the cold air hit my face, and for a moment I stopped, dizzy, overwhelmed. But I took a deep breath and kept going. I took a bus downtown. I got off at the main square. I walked 3 blocks until I reached a gray building with a discreet sign, Bridges Investigations, Legal Services. I went in. A young secretary looked at me in surprise. She probably didn't expect to see a 72-year-old woman asking for a private investigator. "How can I help you? I need to speak with someone. It's urgent. It's about fraud." She hesitated for a moment. Then she picked up the phone. "Let me see if Mr. Bridges can see you." 5 minutes later, I was sitting across from a man in his 50s. Gray hair, serious eyes. Ryan Bridges. The name was engraved on a plaque on his desk. Mrs. Reynolds. Eleanor Reynolds. "Tell me, Mrs. Reynolds, how can I help you?" I told him everything, from the beginning. From Michael's death to Arthur's question at Christmas. I showed him the documents I had found in my room. The forged signatures, the withdrawals, the dates. Ryan listened without interrupting. He took notes in a small notepad. When I finished speaking, he leaned back in his chair and looked at me intently. This is fraud, forgery of documents, theft. Your daughter and son-in-law could go to prison. I know. Are you sure you want to go through with this? They're your family. I thought of Megan's words. You don't produce anything. I thought of the years of humiliation, of the nights I went hungry so I wouldn't waste their food, of how they made me feel invisible. I'm sure. Ryan nodded. I'll need access to the bank records. I need solid proof that they withdrew that money. And I need time. This could take weeks, maybe months. How much do you charge? $3,000 as a retainer, then $2,000 a month until the case is closed. I didn't have that kind of money. I barely had $200 saved from my Social Security checks. Ryan must have seen the panic in my face. Mrs. Reynolds, there is another option. If your brother is willing to finance the investigation. He is, I said quickly. Let me call him. I went out to the street. I dialed Arthur's number. He answered on the second ring. Eleanor, where are you? Megan said you're sick in bed. I'm downtown. Arthur, I found a private investigator. I need your help. There was a silence. Tell me where you are. I'm on my way. Half an hour later, Arthur walked into Ryan Bridges' office. He had a briefcase under his arm, and that expression I knew from childhood. The expression he got when someone messed with his family. Mr. Bridges, Arthur said, shaking his hand. I understand my sister requires your services. That's correct. Name your price, whatever it takes. I want you to find every cent they stole. I want irrefutable proof, and I want it fast. Ryan smiled slightly. I like your style, Mr. Reynolds. Let's begin. For the next hour, the three of us reviewed documents. Arthur provided copies of all the bank papers. Ryan took photographs. He made calls. He wrote down names. I'm going to need access to the house, he said finally. If they have documents hidden, I need to find them. That's a problem, I said. Megan checks everything. If she notices something was moved. Don't worry, Ryan interrupted. I have my methods. Does she leave the house regularly? Tuesdays and Thursdays she goes to the gym. From 10 to 12. Perfect. I'll install a small camera in your room. That way you can record any suspicious conversations. And on Tuesday, I'll go in to search the house. I froze. A camera? In my room? It's legal. It's your private space. No one can stop you from having a camera there. And if they come in and say anything incriminating, it will be recorded. I looked at Arthur. He nodded. It's a good idea, Eleanor. Ryan took a tiny device from his drawer. It looked like a normal phone charger. This plugs into the wall. It has a built-in camera, records audio and video. It's motion activated. No one will suspect a thing. I took it with trembling hands. What if they find it? They won't. Trust me. We left the office 2 hours later. Arthur took me to eat at a quiet restaurant near the park. We ordered coffee and sandwiches. It had been years since I'd eaten in a restaurant. Eleanor, Arthur said, taking my hand across the table. Why didn't you tell me how they were treating you? I looked down. I thought it was my fault. I thought I was a burden. You have never been a burden. You're my sister. I love you, and I'm going to fix this. I promise you. I cried. Right there, in the middle of the restaurant, with the coffee getting cold in front of me. I cried like I hadn't cried since Michael's funeral. Arthur held me. He let me cry on his shoulder until I had no tears left. We're going to get your money back, he said in a firm voice, and we're going to make them pay for what they did. I returned to the house at dusk. Megan was in the kitchen making dinner. She looked at me, surprised. Mom, where were you? I was worried. Ali. Just for a walk. I needed some air. Alone? You could have fallen. You could have gotten lost. I'm fine, Megan. I went up the stairs slowly, acting weaker than I really was. I went into my room. I locked the door. I took out the device Ryan had given me. I plugged it into the outlet next to my bed. The small green light blinked twice and then went out. It was working. I sat on the bed. I took a deep breath. Now came the hard part. I had to act as if nothing had happened. I had to pretend I was still the confused, weak old woman they thought I was. I had to wait. That night at dinner, Mark looked at me suspiciously. Your mom went out today, he told Megan. Alone. Downtown. Megan looked at me. You went downtown, Mom? Just to walk a little. I needed some air. You didn't go anywhere else? No, honey. I just walked. Mark frowned but said nothing more. After dinner, I went up to my room early. I got into bed. I turned off the light, and I waited. At midnight, I heard footsteps in the hall, then whispered voices, Megan and Mark, talking outside my door. She's acting strange, Mark said. Something's changed. It's just old age, Megan replied. Sometimes they have good days. I don't like it. Your uncle is asking questions. She went out alone. What if she went to talk to someone? Who would she talk to? She has no friends. She has no money. She has no one. There was a silence. We need to be sure, Mark said finally. Check her room tomorrow. Look for anything suspicious. I will. The footsteps faded. I smiled in the darkness. Perfect. Let them check. Let them look. They wouldn't find anything, because I was smarter than they thought. And this time, the invisible old woman had a plan. On Tuesday morning, Megan left for the gym as always. I watched her from my bedroom window, getting into her car and driving down the street. Mark had left for work an hour earlier. The house was empty and silent. I waited 10 minutes. Then I called Ryan Bridges. They're gone. You have 2 hours. Perfect. I'm 5 minutes away. Be ready. I went downstairs slowly. I sat in the living room as if it were a normal day, but my heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. Ryan arrived exactly 7 minutes later. He knocked softly on the door. I opened it quickly and let him in. Where is your son-in-law's office? He asked, not wasting time. Upstairs. Second door on the left. Ryan went up the stairs with a black backpack slung over his shoulder. I stayed downstairs, watching through the window, the phone in my hand, ready to call if I saw Megan's car return. 40 minutes passed, feeling like 40 years. Finally, Ryan came down. His backpack looked full, and his face was grim. I found something. Much more than I expected. What? Documents. Bank statements. Receipts. All hidden in the back of a locked drawer. I had to pick it, but I locked it again. They won't notice anything until they try to open it. I felt my legs tremble. What did the documents say? Your daughter and son-in-law didn't just steal your money, Mrs. Reynolds. They used your identity to open 3 credit cards. They've racked up over $80,000 in debt in your name, and they're planning to declare bankruptcy using your personal information. The world stopped. What? If they declare bankruptcy using your identity, you'll be ruined. You won't be able to get credit. You won't be able to rent an apartment. Your credit history will be destroyed. I sat on the sofa before I could fall. But how? How did they do that? They have access to all your documents. Your birth certificate, your social security number, your ID. With that, they can do whatever they want. Ryan took out his phone and showed me pictures of the documents he'd found. Credit card applications in my name, statements with purchases I never made, jewelry, expensive clothes, hotels, restaurants, $78,000 in debt. In my name. This is worse than simple theft, Ryan said, putting his phone away. This is identity theft. It's a federal crime. They could go to prison for years. I just stared at the wall, unable to process what I had just heard. My own daughter, the baby I held in my arms, the little girl I sang lullabies to, the child I worked double shifts for years so she could go to a good school. She was destroying me. Mrs. Reynolds, Ryan's voice brought me back. I need you to listen to me carefully. This is serious, very serious. We need to act fast before they execute their plan. What do I have to do? First, we're going to freeze your credit. Today. So they can't open anything else in your name. Second, we're going to file a formal complaint with the authorities. And third, we're going to get a temporary restraining order on their bank accounts so they can't move any more money. I nodded, still in shock. And how long will all that take? If we act today, 2 weeks, maybe 3. And in the meantime, you have to keep acting normal. They cannot know we've discovered anything. If they suspect, they'll disappear. They'll erase evidence. They'll transfer money to accounts we can't trace. Ryan stood up and walked to the window. I know this is hard. I know it hurts. But I need you to be strong. I need you to pretend nothing happened. Can you do that? I thought of Michael, of how he fought cancer until the very last second, of how he never gave up, of how he held my hand the day before he died and told me, "You're stronger than you think, Eleanor. Never forget that." I looked Ryan in the eyes. I can do it. He nodded. Good. Then here's the plan. I'm going to work with a lawyer to prepare all the legal documents. I'll contact the credit bureaus to freeze your credit. And I'm giving you this. He took a small cell phone from his backpack. It's a new phone. Clean, secure. Only I have the number. If you need to talk to me, use this phone. Never use the house phone. They could be monitoring your calls. I took the phone. It was simple, old-fashioned, the kind that only makes calls and sends texts. Keep it hidden, and always delete the call history after you use it. I will. Ryan checked his watch. I have to go. Your daughter will be back in 30 minutes. I'll be in touch. And remember, act normal. Don't let them see that you know. He left as silently as he'd arrived. I was left alone in the living room, staring at the phone in my hand, feeling the weight of everything I had just discovered. My daughter didn't just steal my money. She stole my identity. She stole my future. She condemned me to a life of debt and misery. And worst of all, she did it without remorse. I went upstairs. I hid the phone in the back of my closet, inside an old shoebox no one ever touched. Then I sat on my bed and took a deep breath. I had to pretend. I had to act like the weak, confused old woman they expected to see. Half an hour later, I heard Megan's car pull into the driveway. The front door opening, her steps on the stairs. She knocked on my door. "Mom, are you awake?" "Yes, honey. Come in." She came in with a grocery bag. "I brought you yogurt, the kind you like." She put it on my nightstand. Then she sat on the edge of my bed. "How are you feeling today?" "Better. A little tired, but better." She nodded. She looked at me with those eyes that were once tender and now only calculated, measured, evaluated. "Mom, I need to ask you something." "What is it?" "Uncle Arthur called me yesterday. He says he's going to hire a lawyer. He says he's going to investigate the investment fund." "I see. Did you say anything to him? Did you tell him you suspected us?" I acted confused. "Suspect? I don't understand, honey." "Mom, this is important. Did you talk to anyone about the money? Did you tell anyone?" "I only spoke to your uncle, at the Christmas dinner, when he asked the question." Megan studied me, searching for any sign of a lie, searching for cracks in my facade. But I had spent 3 years learning to be invisible. I had perfected the art of showing nothing. "Okay, Mom. I just wanted to make sure." She got up to leave. But before she left, she stopped at the door. "Mom, if anyone comes asking you about the money, about documents, about anything, you don't say anything. Do you understand me?" "Nothing. They could be scammers trying to confuse you." "I understand, honey." "Good." She closed the door. I sat there, motionless, counting to 100 before I moved. Then I took the notebook from under my mattress. I added a new note. January 12th. Megan warned me not to talk to anyone. She's scared. Arthur is pressuring them. They're afraid. I put the notebook away. I looked at the charger plugged into the wall, the hidden camera, recording everything. That night at dinner, Mark barely looked at me. He ate quickly and locked himself in his office. Megan was tense too. She just pushed the food around on her plate. "Is something wrong, honey?" I asked in an innocent voice. "No. It's just work. A lot of stress." "Ali." But I just nodded and continued eating my soup in silence. After washing the dishes, I went up to my room. I locked the door. I took out the phone Ryan had given me. I had one message. "Credit frozen. Lawyer contacted. Meeting tomorrow 3 p.m. The Oakwood Diner. Come alone." I deleted the message. I turned off the phone. I hid it again, and I smiled. Because while Megan and Mark slept soundly, thinking they had won, I was building the perfect trap. A trap they couldn't escape. A trap that would teach them that the invisible old woman they had despised for years was actually the most dangerous woman they had ever met. And this time, I wouldn't be asking for forgiveness. This time, I would be demanding justice. The Oakwood Diner was downtown, hidden between old buildings and antique shops. I arrived at 3 o'clock sharp, walking slowly, looking over my shoulder every few steps. Megan thought I had gone to the doctor. I told her I had an appointment to check my blood pressure. "Do you want me to take you, Mom?" she had asked that morning. "No, honey. The doctor is close. I can take the bus." She hadn't insisted, probably relieved she didn't have to go with me. Ryan was already at a table in the back. With him was an older man, in his 60s, with thick glasses and a worn leather briefcase. They stood up when they saw me arrive. "Mrs. Reynolds," Ryan said. "This is Howard Mason, forensic accountant. He's the best in cases of financial fraud." Howard extended his hand. He had a firm, confident grip. "A pleasure, ma'am. Ryan has brought me up to speed on your situation. It's serious, but we have options." We sat down. I ordered a tea I had no intention of drinking. My hands were shaking too much to hold the cup. Howard opened his briefcase and took out a thick folder full of papers. "I've reviewed all the documents Ryan recovered from the house. And I also requested information directly from the bank. Here's what we found." He put several papers in front of me, numbers, dates, transactions. "Your daughter and son-in-law withdrew a total of $380,000 from your investment fund over 3 years. But that's not all. They opened 3 credit cards in your name with combined limits of $100,000. They currently have a debt of $78,000. Howard passed another paper. "They also took out a $50,000 personal loan using your previous house as collateral, the house you and your husband sold to pay for his medical bills." I couldn't breathe. "But that house is gone. We sold it." "I know. They lied on the application. They said you still owned it. They forged the property documents." I closed my eyes. Each revelation was a deeper blow. "How much do I owe in total?" I asked in a broken voice. $128,000, not counting interest. $128,000 in debt that I didn't create. $128,000 that would destroy my life if we didn't do something. "But there is good news," Howard continued. "We've already frozen your credit. They can't open anything new, and we have more than enough proof to show that you did not sign these documents. We are going to clear your name. How long will it take?" 2 months. Maybe 3. But we'll get it done." Ryan leaned forward. "Mrs. Reynolds, now comes the important part. We need you to help us set the final trap." "What trap?" "We're going to organize a family dinner. In 2 weeks, you're going to invite your daughter, your son-in-law, your brother Arthur, and any other close family you have. You're going to tell them you want to make peace, that you want to discuss the money issue civilizedly. Why? To expose them, publicly, in front of the whole family, with irrefutable proof." Howard nodded. "During that dinner, we will present all the documents. We will show the bank statements, the forgeries, the debts, and we will give them 2 options. Either they voluntarily return all the money and face civil consequences, or they refuse and face criminal charges." A chill ran down my spine. "And if they refuse?" "Then we call the police," Ryan said in a cold voice. "I have an officer on standby, a friend who owes me a favor. He'll be outside the house during the dinner. If they refuse to cooperate, he comes in and arrests them on the spot." I looked at both men. I saw the determination in their eyes, the controlled rage, the desire for justice. "You would do all this? For me?" Howard smiled sadly. "Mrs. Reynolds, 30 years ago, when my wife was sick with cancer, I didn't have money for the treatments. Your husband, Michael, lent me $20,000 without asking for any interest. He told me to pay him back when I could. He saved my wife's life." Tears burned my eyes. "I never forgot that kindness," Howard continued. "And when Ryan told me what was being done to Michael's widow, I knew I had to help. Not just for him, but because it's the right thing to do." Ryan spoke up too. "My mother went through something similar. My brother stole from her, left her on the street. By the time we found out, it was too late. She died alone in a state-run nursing home. I was never able to do anything for her, but I can do something for you. I wiped the tears away with a shaky hand. Thank you. Thank you both. We spent the next hour planning every detail. The date of the dinner, January 28th, a Saturday. The place, Megan's house, because if we tried to do it anywhere else, she would be suspicious. The guests, Arthur, my cousin Lorraine, and my neighbor Rita, who had always been like a sister to me. We need witnesses, Ryan explained. People who will see what happens, people you trust. And if Megan refuses to have the dinner, she won't. You're going to tell her that Arthur insists, that he wants to resolve everything in the family without lawyers, without trouble. She'll want that opportunity. She'll think she can manipulate the situation. Howard took out more papers. I also need you to sign these documents. They are authorizations for us to act on your behalf, to file suits, to talk to the bank, to recover your money. I signed every paper with a steady hand, steadier than it had been in years. When we finished, it was already getting dark. I left the diner feeling strangely light, as if a weight I had carried for years was finally beginning to lift. I went back to the house on the bus. Megan was in the kitchen preparing dinner. How was the doctor, Mom? Good. He says my blood pressure is better. That's great. We ate in silence. Mark came home late, as usual, smelling of whiskey and cigarettes. He looked at me with distrust as I passed him on the way to the stairs. That night, lying in my bed, I took out my notebook. I wrote down every detail of the meeting, every name, every plan, and then I wrote something else. In 2 weeks, it all ends. In 2 weeks, I get my life back. In 2 weeks, Megan and Mark will understand that they underestimated the wrong woman. The next few days were the hardest. I had to keep acting as if nothing was wrong, keep being the invisible old woman, keep accepting their scraps. But now, every insult was fuel. Every look of contempt was motivation. Every time they treated me like trash, I smiled inside, knowing what was coming. On Thursday of that week, I called Arthur. Brother, I need to ask you a favor. Anything, Eleanor. I want to host a family dinner. Here at Megan's house. On January 28th. Can you come? There was a pause. Arthur understood immediately. It's time. It's time. I'll be there, with everything you need. Then I called Lorraine, my cousin. We hadn't spoken in months. Eleanor, it's you. Yes, Lorraine. I miss you. Could you come to a dinner on the 28th? I want us all to be together. Of course. Are you okay? You sound different. I'm better than ever. And finally, I called Rita, my old neighbor. Rita, I need you to come to a dinner. It's important. What's wrong, Eleanor? Are you in trouble? Not anymore. But I need you to be there. Count on me. That night, at dinner, I told Megan casually. Honey, I want to have a family dinner on the 28th. Invite your Uncle Arthur, your cousin Lorraine, Rita, to celebrate that we're all together. Megan looked at me, surprised. A dinner? Here? Yes. Arthur insists. He says he wants to resolve the money issue in the family, without lawyers, without problems, just us, talking. I saw the interest light up in her eyes. The greed, the hope that she could manipulate the situation in her favor. Arthur said that? Yes. He says he doesn't want a scandal. He just wants to understand what happened and move on. Mark and Megan exchanged a look that said, we can convince him. We can make this go away. Okay, Mom, Megan said finally. Let's have the dinner. I smiled sweetly. Thank you, honey. I knew I could count on you. I went up to my room. I locked the door, and I let out a silent laugh. The trap was set. The stage was ready. In 2 weeks, the mask would fall, and Megan and Mark would discover that the old woman they robbed, humiliated, and destroyed for years was, in fact, their worst nightmare. Because I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to do something far more devastating. I was going to tell the truth. The days leading up to January 28th passed in slow motion. Every hour felt like a full day. Every minute weighed like a stone in my chest. But I kept going, one step at a time, one breath at a time. Megan began to prepare the house with obvious nervousness. She cleaned every corner, bought fresh flowers, changed the bed linens. She cooked expensive dishes she never made for me. "I want everything to look perfect," she told me the day before. "Your brother is an important man. We can't look bad." I just nodded, smiled, acted like the grateful old woman she expected to see. Mark was tense, too. I saw him rehearsing conversations in front of his office mirror, practicing explanations, preparing lies. He thought he could convince Arthur that it had all been a misunderstanding. On the morning of the 28th, I woke up before dawn. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of what was to come. It wasn't fear I felt. It was something deeper, colder. It was absolute certainty. I got up. I showered. I dressed in the only decent dress I owned, a gray one I had bought years ago for Michael's funeral. I combed my hair carefully. I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back was not the same one who had arrived at this house 3 years ago. That woman was broken, lost, desperate. This woman had cold eyes, a tight jaw, a straight back. This woman was ready for war. Ryan had sent me a message the night before. "All set. The officer will be outside at 7:00. Howard will arrive with the documents at 7:15. Arthur knows exactly what to do. Trust the plan." I deleted the message. I put the phone away. At 5:00, the guests began to arrive. Lorraine was first. She hugged me so tight, she almost squeezed the air out of me. "Eleanor, you're so thin. Are they feeding you?" "I'm fine, cousin. Thank you for coming." Rita arrived 15 minutes later. She brought a cake she had baked. She took my hands and looked me in the eyes with that intensity only she had. "Are you sure about this?" she whispered. "Completely." She nodded. "Then count on me for whatever you need." Arthur arrived at exactly 7:00. He brought an expensive bottle of wine and that diplomatic smile he used in his business dealings. But when he looked at me, I saw the contained rage in his eyes, the silent promise of justice. We all sat in the dining room. Megan had set a beautiful table, white tablecloth, candles, fine china we never used. Everything was perfect on the surface. But underneath that perfection, there was a current of tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. Mark poured wine. We made a toast. We ate the first course in an awkward silence, broken only by shallow comments about the weather, work, the kids. Megan was a nervous wreck. She talked too much, laughed too loudly. She refilled her wine glass every 5 minutes. Mark tried to look relaxed, but his hands shook every time he lifted his fork. It was Arthur who finally broke the facade. "Well," he said, setting his glass down on the table with a sharp sound, "I think we all know why we're here tonight." The silence grew heavier. Megan tried to smile. "Uncle Arthur, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding about Mom's investment fund. We can explain." "Explain?" Arthur's voice was like ice. "Explain how you stole $380,000? Explain how you forged my sister's signature? Explain how you opened credit cards in her name and put her nearly $80,000 in debt?" Megan turned pale. Mark dropped his fork. We don't know what you're talking about," Megan stammered. At that exact moment, the doorbell rang. It was me who got up to open it. Howard Mason was on the doorstep with his leather briefcase and a serious expression. "Good evening, Mrs. Reynolds." "Come in, Howard." I led him to the dining room. All eyes were on him. "Good evening," Howard said in a professional voice. "My name is Howard Mason. I'm a forensic accountant, and I have been hired to investigate the financial fraud committed against Mrs. Eleanor Reynolds." Megan jumped to her feet. "What is this? Who is this man?" "Sit down, Megan," I said, with a calm that surprised even me. "It's time for you to listen." She looked at me as if I had become a different person. Because in a way, I had. Howard opened his briefcase and began to pull out documents. Piles and piles of paper. He laid them on the table, one by one. Bank statement from the investment fund. "Here you can see the unauthorized withdrawals. $40,000 on January 15th, 3 years ago. $35,000 on March 22nd of the same year. $50,000 on July 8th. He kept reading date after date, amount after amount. Every word was a hammer blow. Credit card applications, In the name of Eleanor Reynolds. 3 different banks, combined limits of $100,000. Current debt, $78,000. He put down more papers. Here we have the forged signatures. You can see the difference compared to Mrs. Reynolds's actual signature. They aren't even good imitations. Mark tried to stand up. This is ridiculous. We don't have to listen to this in our own house. Sit down, Arthur said, his voice so threatening that Mark immediately obeyed. Howard continued. We also have records of purchases. A BMW for $52,000. 2 trips to Europe for a combined $30,000. A kitchen remodel for $25,000. Private school tuition for $15,000 a year. He looked directly at Megan. All of it paid for with your mother's money, while she ate leftovers and wore second-hand clothes. Lorraine let out a choked gasp. Rita squeezed my hand under the table. Megan started to cry. Mom, please. We were going to pay you back. We just needed time. Things were tight and… Tight? My voice sounded strange, powerful, new. Trips to Europe are tight? Luxury cars are tight? I stood up. I walked around the table until I was standing right in front of her. For 3 years you made me feel like trash, like a burden, like my existence was a problem. You told me I didn't produce anything, that I was a weight on this family. Megan was sobbing. Mom, forgive me. And all that time, you were living on my money. The money my brother put there so I could have dignity, so I would never have to depend on anyone. Mark tried to speak. Eleanor, we can pay it all back. We can make a payment plan. We can. A payment plan? Arthur let out a bitter laugh. With what money? The money you already stole? Howard took out another document. Here is the complete list of assets purchased with the stolen money. The car, the furniture, the jewelry. All of it can be seized and sold to recover a portion of the money. Megan grabbed my arm. Mom, please. We're family. You can't do this to us. Think of the children. Think of your grandchildren. I looked at her. I saw her tear-streaked face, her pleading eyes, and I felt nothing. Nothing except absolute coldness. I thought about family every day I went hungry in this house. I thought about family every time you made me feel invisible. I thought about family every night I cried in my room, wondering why my own daughter hated me so much. I pulled my arm away from her grasp. But you never thought about me. Not once. Arthur stood up. You have 2 options. Option 1. You sign an agreement right now to repay every cent within 6 months. You sell the car. You sell the jewelry. You take out a mortgage on this house if you have to. And on top of that, Eleanor files a civil suit that will force you to pay damages. He paused. Option 2. You refuse, and we call the police who are waiting outside. You will be arrested for fraud, forgery, and identity theft. Those are federal crimes. You'll go to prison for 10 years. The silence that followed was deafening. Megan looked at Mark. Mark stared at the floor. The police are outside? Megan whispered. Yes, I answered, and they're waiting for my signal. Lorraine and Rita watched in silence, witnesses to the fall of 2 people who thought they were smarter than an old woman. Mark was the first to speak. We'll sign the agreement. Megan looked at him in horror. What? No, this is our house. We can't. Megan, Mark yelled. We could go to prison. Do you understand that? Prison. She collapsed in her chair, sobbing uncontrollably. Howard produced the prepared agreement. He placed it in front of them, along with a pen. Sign here, and here, and here. Mark signed first. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely write. Sonia took longer. She stared at the paper as if it were her death sentence, because, in a way, it was. Finally, she signed. Howard collected the documents. This agreement is legally binding. If you fail to make the payments, you will be prosecuted automatically. There will be no second chance. He left without another word. I remained standing, looking at my daughter, at my son-in-law, broken, humiliated, destroyed. And I felt something I hadn't felt in 3 years. Peace. The room was plunged into a silence so heavy you could feel it on your skin. No one moved for what felt like hours, but was only seconds. The sound of Megan's sobs filled the space like a distorted, cruel music. Mark had his head in his hands, hiding his face from the shame that consumed him. Arthur was the first to break that suspended moment. He rose from his chair with slow, deliberate movements. He walked over to me and put his hand on my shoulder. He didn't need to say anything. His presence was enough. It was the support I had lacked for so long. It was the real family that had never abandoned me, even when he was thousands of miles away. Lorraine also stood up. She came to me with eyes full of tears, but with an expression of pride I will never forget. She hugged me tightly, wordlessly, because words couldn't cover what was happening. Rita remained seated, but her eyes followed me with a mixture of admiration and sadness. She knew better than anyone what it had cost me to get to this point. I looked at Megan, my daughter, the child I had raised in my arms, the child I had taught to walk, to read, to be strong, and now she was there, broken by her own decisions, destroyed by her own greed. Part of me wanted to feel pity. Part of me wanted to go to her and hold her like I did when she was little and had nightmares. But another part of me, the part that had been humiliated and degraded for 3 endless years, stood firm as a rock. The signed documents lay on the table. Tangible proof of the betrayal. Irrefutable proof of what they had done. Each signature was a confession. Each initial was an admission of guilt. There would be no escape now. There would be no way to erase what they had just acknowledged in front of witnesses. Mark finally lifted his head. His face was pale, gaunt, as if he had aged 10 years in one night. He looked at me with a mixture of hatred and fear. Hatred because he had been defeated. Fear because he knew his life as he knew it was over. The BMW would have to be sold. The jewelry would have to go to pawn shops. The house would have to be mortgaged. Everything they had built with my stolen money would crumble like a house of cards. Megan was still crying, but her tears no longer moved me. I had cried too many nights alone in my room while she slept peacefully in her expensive bed, bought with my stolen future. I had shed all my tears feeling like a useless burden while she planned her next trip to Europe with my money. There was no compassion left in me for those false tears. Arthur carefully collected the documents from the table as if they were sacred objects. He put them in his briefcase with precise movements. Those papers were more than just contracts. They were my freedom. They were my dignity, recovered. They were proof that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't a confused old woman, that I had been the victim of a calculated and cruel crime. The dinner Megan had prepared with such care remained untouched on the table. The expensive plates, the elegant candles, the fine tablecloth. It was all a facade, one more lie in a life built on lies. Food bought with stolen money. Decorations paid for with my suffering. I wondered how many times I had eaten at this same table feeling I didn't deserve to be there, while they enjoyed luxuries financed by my misery. Rita finally got up and walked to the kitchen. I heard water running, the sound of plates. She was cleaning, doing something productive in the midst of the emotional chaos that filled the house. It was her way of supporting me, her way of telling me she was there for whatever was needed. Lorraine followed her after a moment. The two women worked in silence, giving me space to process what had just happened. Mark got up from the table with clumsy movements. He walked to the window and stood there, looking out at the dark street, probably seeing the police car waiting outside. The constant reminder of how close they had come to prison. The reminder that they could still end up there if they didn't comply with the agreement they had just signed. Megan eventually stopped crying. She just sat there with a vacant look, her eyes red and swollen, her makeup smeared. It was a pathetic sight, a very different image from the confident, arrogant woman who had treated me like trash for years. The power had shifted, and she knew it. She was no longer the absolute ruler of this house. She was no longer the one who made the rules. Now she was a debtor, a criminal, spared by mercy. Arthur came over to me again. He spoke softly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. He told me he had rented an apartment for me, a small but dignified place downtown, furnished, paid for 6 months. A place where I could live in peace while the whole legal process of recovering the money was sorted out. A place where I would never again have to feel like a burden. My brother's words were like balm on open wounds. my own apartment, a space where I could close the door and know that no one would make me feel bad for existing. A place where I could cook without measuring every gram of food, where I could take a hot shower without worrying, where I could simply be. I looked around that living room where I had spent 3 years of my life. 3 years that felt like 30. Every corner held a painful memory. The corner where Megan had yelled at me for leaving a light on. The sofa where I sat in silence, trying to be invisible. The table where I ate leftovers while they enjoyed full meals. This place was never my home. It was my prison. I went up the stairs slowly. Each step was a step toward my freedom. I entered my room for the last time as a resident of that house. I looked at the bed where I had slept through endless, tear-filled nights. The closet with my old, worn-out clothes. The window from which I had looked out so many times, wishing I were anywhere else. I pulled my suitcase from the back of the closet. The same suitcase I had brought the day I arrived at this house after Michael's funeral. I began to pack my clothes slowly, folding each item with care. I didn't have much. 3 dresses, a few blouses, mended underwear, worn-out shoes. It was all I owned in the material world. But now I had something much more valuable. I had my dignity back. I also packed the few photographs I had. Michael and me on our wedding anniversary. Megan as a baby. My parents in their youth. Memories of a time when family meant love, not betrayal. Memories of when Megan looked at me with admiration, not contempt. The notebook where I had written down everything during these weeks also went into the suitcase. Those pages contained the evidence of my awakening. The transformation from victim to fighter. The evolution from a broken woman to a woman avenged. Someday, maybe I would reread it and be surprised at my own strength. I went downstairs with my suitcase. Arthur took it from my hands before I could protest. Lorraine and Rita were already waiting by the door. They had finished cleaning the kitchen. They had erased the traces of the dinner that was never completed. The dinner that became a trial. Megan was still sitting in the same chair. She hadn't moved. She hadn't tried to stop me. Maybe she knew she had no right. Maybe she finally understood that she had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Mark remained by the window like a statue. I walked to the door. I paused for a moment. I turned and looked at my daughter one last time that night. I said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Everything that needed to be said had been said. Everything that needed to be done had been done. I walked out of that house with my head held high. The cold night air hit my face, and I felt like I could breathe deeply for the first time in years. The police car was still there. The officer gave me a nod. His intervention wouldn't be necessary tonight, but his presence had been essential, the silent reminder of real consequences. Arthur opened his car door. I got in. Lorraine and Rita got in the back. As we drove away, I didn't look back. There was nothing left for me there, nothing but the past. And I was driving toward the future. A future that, for the first time in 4 years, belonged only to me. The legal battle that followed was exactly what Howard and Ryan had predicted. Brutal, but swift. Megan and Mark, faced with the overwhelming evidence, had no choice but to comply. The BMW was sold at auction. The jewelry was appraised and bought by a dealer. They took out a second mortgage on their house, a house now tainted by fraud, to pay back the lump sum of the $380,000 they had stolen from the fund. It took 4 months. 4 months of legal filings, asset seizures, and tense mediations. During that time, I lived in the small downtown apartment Arthur had rented for me. It was quiet, it was safe, and it was mine. I learned to enjoy the silence, to cook for myself again, to sit by the window with a cup of tea and read for hours without interruption. Howard Mason, true to his word, worked tirelessly to clear my name. He filed reports with all 3 credit bureaus, detailing the identity theft. He presented the signed confession and the police report. One by one, the fraudulent debts were erased from my record. The $78,000 in credit card debt, the $50,000 personal loan, they vanished. My credit, which had been destroyed, was slowly restored. Arthur visited me once a month, flying in from Miami. He would take me to nice dinners, and we would talk, really talk, for the first time in decades. We talked about our childhood, about our regrets, and about the future. He never once made me feel like a burden. He made me feel like his sister. Rita and Lorraine were my constant companions. They would stop by with groceries or just to chat. We formed a small, strong circle of women who understood what it meant to endure. I never heard directly from Megan. The only communication came through her lawyer. There were no apologies, no letters of remorse, no attempts to see me or ask for forgiveness. Her silence was, in its own way, the final confession. It confirmed that the contempt I had seen in her eyes that night was real. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was only sorry she got caught. I sometimes wondered about my grandchildren. I missed the boys I had helped raise. But I knew that seeing them would mean seeing Megan and Mark, and that was a bridge I was unwilling to cross. The toxicity was too deep, the wound too severe. After 6 months, the money was fully recovered and deposited back into my investment fund, which Howard was now managing for me. The civil suit was settled, with Megan and Mark paying an additional sum for damages, which covered all my legal fees and the rent for the apartment. I had a choice to make. I could go to Miami with Arthur, or I could stay. I chose to stay. I used a portion of the settlement money as a down payment on my own small condominium, not far from Rita's house. It was the first home I had ever owned all by myself. I furnished it slowly, with pieces I chose, not with leftovers. I painted the walls a soft yellow. I planted a small garden on the balcony. It became my sanctuary. One day, about a year after the dinner, I was volunteering at the local community center when I saw a flyer, a support group for seniors dealing with financial elder abuse. I stood looking at it for a long time. Then, I went to the meeting. I sat in the circle and listened to stories that were heartbreakingly similar to my own. And when it was my turn, I spoke. I told my story. I didn't know it then, but my life had found a new purpose. I became an advocate, a voice for the invisible old women and men who were being silenced and stolen from by their own families. I worked with Ryan and Howard, who now referred cases to me. I helped others find the resources to fight back. I never saw Megan or Mark again. Rita told me they sold their house, the one bought with my money, and moved to another state. They had to downsize, their lives of luxury gone. The justice was not in their punishment, but in my liberation. I lived another 15 years. 15 years of peace, dignity, and purpose. I traveled. I painted. I laughed with my friends. I advised my brother on his charitable giving. I became the woman I was always meant to be, not the one they had tried to turn me into. When I died at 87, I was in my own bed, in my own home, surrounded by photos of Michael, Arthur, Rita, and Lorraine. I left my entire estate, the fund that had been the source of so much pain and, ultimately, my liberation to the elder abuse center I had helped build. My story was not about the money. It was never about the money. It was about a signature. It was about whose name had value. They thought they could erase mine and write their own over it. But they were wrong. My name was Eleanor Reynolds, and my story was just beginning.